Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 406 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Dexcom, makers of the G6 continuous glucose monitor, the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump, and Touched by Type 1. Touched by Type 1's 20th annual Dancing for Diabetes show is virtual this year, and you can watch it at touchedbytype1.org. It'll be available on November 14th. That's this Saturday, November 14th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I just spoke with Elizabeth the other day, and they filmed the entire event in a huge auditorium. She said it was really exciting and definitely worth your time. You know what else is worth your time? The Omnipod tubeless insulin pump, and you can get a free no-obligation demo of that pod sent directly to your home, absolutely for the free, by going to myomnipod.com/juicebox. And of course, at dexcom.com/juicebox, you can find out a lot about the Dexcom G6, like how to get it, what it is, and oh, by the way, if you get your healthcare through the VA, Dexcom is now covered. Sean lives with type 1 diabetes. He's a husband and a police officer. And today we're going to talk about a little of all of that here on the Juicebox Podcast. Can you imagine if I did it all like that? I'd be like, oh, welcome to the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show. Anyway, Sean's a cop. I grew up around a lot of police officers, and so I have a little bit of background about what it's like to be a police officer, a little bit of background, tangentially, if you understand what I'm saying. So Sean and I got along very well. He told me how the podcast helped him, what it's like to do his job with type 1 diabetes, and he wanted to come on to encourage young people who'd like to be in law enforcement and who are living with type 1 diabetes to know that they can. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan, searching for Spanish doubloons on the bottom of the ocean, or becoming bold with insulin. Oh, I've piqued your interest, haven't I? Let's get to Sean.
I'm Sean Hunter. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Camden County, New Jersey. I'm a type 1 diabetic. Been diabetic for 17 years. And I'm a police officer, also in Camden County, New Jersey. And that's why I was interested in coming on and talking to you, Scott.
Cool. That's amazing, because I think you're the first police officer that's reached out and said, you know, I'm happy for you to tell people I'm a police officer. I think I've interviewed other police officers, but they haven't brought up that they are, which is interesting sometimes. But I was really pleased with your note. Interestingly, I grew up around. You're going to be able to tell in a second, because I'm going to say cops instead of police officers, because I don't know how often I can say police officers. But I grew up around cops, and
right.
Just one of my best friends in the whole world at the time. And then sort of by proxy, you get drawn into their life a little bit. So, you know, I've been at picnics with 40 police officers, or gone on motorcycle rides with 50 guys that are all cops, you know, in the middle of the night, which, by the way, if you've never ridden a motorcycle at midnight with 50 cops, you're missing out.
Yeah, it sounds like fun.
Yeah. There's a real feeling that we can't get a ticket, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I hear you.
Anyway.
Yeah. I was sorry to cut you off. I was just excited to come on and try and give some, you know, point of view from the law enforcement side. You know, hopefully there's people out there that are type 1 diabetics, that are cops, and they're, you know, can listen to this, or you know, maybe there's kids out there that want to be cops and they're kind of skeptical because of the diabetes. So I'm trying to hoping to kind of
make it seem possible, right? Yeah. Well, you know, there's a real irony in this, that last night I edited a episode that's going to go up today with a young woman in Massachusetts. I think she's 26, honestly, when I recorded with her. She'd only had diabetes for about 9 months when I recorded with her, and she wants to be a police officer. And it's very strange, because I didn't schedule that to happen like that, obviously, but it was really interesting. So let's talk a little bit first about being diagnosed when you're 9. So that's old enough to have a memory of it, I imagine, and probably in one of those sweet spots for boys where I don't imagine you were thrilled to find out.
Yeah, so obviously I was 9 years old. It was during the summer. I don't really remember the date, but all I remember is that one of the most distinct memories, I was at a pool party, and I really couldn't quench my thirst, which is one of those signs.
Yeah.
And instead of drinking water, I'm a little kid, I wanted to drink soda, which obviously was then spiking my blood sugar up higher, which I had no idea about. But then my parents, throughout the night, the next couple of nights, they were keeping an eye on me. They thought I was dehydrated. My dad's an EMT, so he said, hey, to my mom, hey, take him to the hospital. Maybe he's just dehydrated. They'll give him some fluids and send him home. When we went to the hospital, went in, told the intake person my symptoms. They brought me immediately back because they know the symptoms of diabetes, and I was kind of in that age group.
Yeah.
And they tested my sugar, and I was 898. Wow.
You're well on your way to something. Do you remember, had you felt poorly for how long prior to that? Did it come on quickly, or what does hindsight then tell you was happening? Do you remember?
It was probably like 3 to 5 days that I was, feeling really bad, throwing up a lot, obviously using the bathroom a lot, not keeping any food down. And my mom said my eyes were sunken back, just looked like I was dying, which
you obviously were. Yeah. So you were in DKA.
Yeah, pretty much. And I don't really have any memory of that. The only memory I have of being in the hospital is that my mom was so nervous that she went to get her insurance card out of her purse and she dropped like $300 worth of change on the floor that she had in her purse.
Why
and it was just like the last,
Yeah. Sean, why do moms always have so much change in their purse? Like, I dated a girl for a long time. She never had a quarter. And then suddenly I had a couple babies with her and she's got 2 fistfuls of change in her purse. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it was just a little bit of laughter to kind of break the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah. Now that's amazing. Hey, listen, your voice is cutting in and out on me a little bit.
Okay.
So when you're pausing, you probably have noise canceling on your headphones. And so every time you stop talking, it wants to take away background noise. So let's try to figure out a way around that. First of all, are those the only headphones you have? Do you have like gamer headphones or something like that by any chance?
I don't think so. I can check.
No, even Apple just on the wire with the microphone in the cord.
Let me go look. I don't believe so.
It's okay. And if not, I have another idea. So your mom has her little moment of levity that kind of breaks the ice a little bit. You go back. Were you in the hospital long? How long did they keep you?
So that night they gave me fluids, brought my sugar back down. I assume, insulin and all that stuff. And then they transferred me to CHOP in Philly. Mm-hmm. And I stayed there for a week.
A week?
Yeah. So I was there for a week for education, I guess.
Okay.
But I specifically remember being there for a week and playing Xbox and doing all this cool stuff at CHOP. It was a cool hospital for kids. So
they do a nice job there of taking care of kids. You and I live pretty near each other, right?
Yeah, that was another reason I wanted to talk to you. It was kind of cool having another New Jerseyan.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Arden's hospital. That's not where she was diagnosed, but it's where her endocrinologist is out of. Do you use an adult endo now in New Jersey?
Yeah, so I use Cooper endocrinology. I just commented on your post in the group actually the other day. I use Dr. Becker from Cooper. It's
funny, you were not the only one that brought up that practice. So that's usually a good sign when people are like, oh, this place,
yeah.
That's excellent. It's hard to find too, a good adult endocrinology. And you would have some feeling about that too, because you left CHOP that does a really good job for kids. And were you able to find Cooper right away, or was there any struggle in between?
Yeah, so I actually stayed with CHOP until I think I was 20 or 21. I really didn't want to leave, and then I was the really old guy going in and seeing all these little kids, so they kind of pushed me out. But I found Cooper really easily. They referred me there, and it was a good transition. So.
It's a funny image, by the way, of you just you rolling through like, hey guys, what's up?
Yeah, I'm the veteran walking through with these little kids that are diagnosed.
So how old were you when you thought you wanted to be a police officer?
Going throughout high school, I think so. Like in that 14 to 18 range. I grew up with public servants in my family,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoyed seeing them go out and make a difference in the world, and that's the reason why I wanted to become a cop. So I think as of then, it really, drew my attention. I wanted to go do it, and then I, obviously went to college and studied criminal justice, and started to pursue that career field.
And there are two paths to it. Am I correct that you can go to college and take a criminal justice track, or you can just go right to the police academy too? Is that the other option, or is that not like that anymore?
No, that's true. There are a lot of different options. You could actually even pay your own way through an academy,
Mm-hmm.
Without having really any. I mean, I think you need some sort of college credits, but you can pay your own way through and then kind of get hired out of the police academy with that, police training and commission certification.
So I grew up around, like I said, a lot of police officers. None of them directly in my family, but good friends, through my late teens who were a little older than me. And I know scads of great cops, people who want to be cops for the right reason, do a great job at it, have been at it for decades. And I've seen a couple who are sketchy along the way, but I have the greatest sketchy story that I'm going to share with you at some point because it's hilarious. And I want to, I've never said this on the podcast before, but when I was 18, because of being around these people and having no real direction in my life, I thought I'd like to be a police officer. And my local town was hiring 3, right? And so back then they put out a test, and you took the test, and that test would whittle down, and then there was interviews, and it went down to this process. Then they chose from that group of people and sent those people off to the police academy. So I'm barely 19 years old by the time the test comes up. And Sean, it's weird when you hear me talk on the podcast because I probably seem like an idiot, but I'm bright in strange ways that don't show in regular life, which is it's hard to put into words. But this test ended up basically just being an IQ test. It was a fancy IQ test, and I crushed it. And so when I first told a friend of mine who back then was just an officer, that I wanted to do this, the first thing he said was, "Yo, man, you're 19. They're not going to give you a gun." He's like, "You're never going to get through this process." He's like, "You're old enough, technically, air quotes, but no one's going to let you be a cop when you're 19. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to take the test anyway." So I take the test, and just days before the test, the lieutenant comes to my house and says, "Hey, listen, we think this is great, but you need to know you're too young, and you're never going to make it through." And I was like, okay. And it seemed all very like, I was like, all right, I understand this. But I did so well on the test that they couldn't weed me out. So the next thing I know, I have an interview, and it's me and the top 20 people. And, when you're young, I just figured I must have been the 20th person. And at the end of the interview with some of the lieutenants and certain designated officers, at the end, they told me how well they thought I did. And of course that I wasn't going to make it to the next round because, I'm 19. And then a couple weeks later, the letters come out and I make it to the next round. And now I'm in the interviews with the 10. And by the time it was over, I was top 6 for that job. Because I was doing
nobody wanted you.
Well, they wanted me to be older is what they wanted, but I hadn't done anything yet that made them think, we can't just tell him no. Like, he's doing better in these interviews than people. And he did, and so when it got down to the top 6, I actually, by then I was like, is this going to happen? Like, even I started thinking, I'm only 19. They probably shouldn't give me a gun. Like, I started having that thought on my own. And it eventually went away gracefully, and people were very nice about it. And, the end result was you're too young to be a police officer in our eyes. But try again. And by the time, like, openings don't come that often. And it was a smaller, place.
Right.
And by the time they did, I had sort of, in my mind, moved on. But it was a very strange, like, 9-month period where everyone in the town was like, are they going to give that kid a gun? It's exactly how it felt for a while. But you went to college and you got a criminal justice degree. Did anything in college dissuade you, or were you like straight on the whole way? Like, this is what I'm going to do.
So I think originally before I went to college, I wanted to do something like, physical therapy or personal trainer kind of background. I'm really into sports, and I played baseball throughout college. Yeah. But I really wanted to help people and serve, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to do. So I don't think anything really dissuaded me after I went to college. If anything, it pushed me forward. Having really good professors who were retired police officers, lieutenants, chiefs, and stuff like that really pushed me towards that goal.
And you're not a cop in a nice little town like the one where I was trying to be a police officer. Like you have a tough job, don't you?
We're in a smaller town, but we are definitely a pretty busy town, with a lot of different calls for service and some pretty serious crimes that happen. So we definitely get our share of fun stuff that happens.
Yeah, I have an acquaintance from years ago who's an older gentleman, older than I, and he did a task force in South Jersey serving drug warrants, and He said he could only do it for about a year. He said it was the most heartbreaking, horrible job he had ever had in his life, and about a year into it, he went back to his chief, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it needs to be someone else.
Yeah, I actually started my career in a pretty infamous city down in South Jersey. I worked there for almost 3 years, and then I switched departments, and I'm in like I said, a smaller town now, but still pretty busy.
You and I might have a conversation after this is over, because the stories he told me they're not appropriate for the show. They have nothing to do with diabetes, but they're horrifying, and they've shaped a lot about how I think about some of the jobs people have to do. So you're into helping people. How old's your father now? Is he still an EMT?
He slowed down a little bit on the EMT side. He's a paid firefighter. He actually just got promoted to deputy chief. He actually works in the same town I work in as a police officer.
Isn't that interesting? My dad did volunteer firefighting when we were kids. He never became professional at it, but he was a dedicated guy who kind of broke the what some people might have is a vision of what a volunteer fireman is a guy trying to get away from his family, drinking beer at the back of a building that has a couple of fire trucks in it. But he really cared about it and did really good work. And for a number of years, especially before alarm systems became common, there were a lot more fires. Like you don't realize things don't burn down as much as they used to 20 years ago. But he was a firefighter during a time in our town and surrounding places where things really, really, they needed firefighters, and there were some serious building fires. And I actually did it for 3 years through my teenage years as well. And, I only did it for 3 years, but I learned a lot about being calm and, not freaking out when most other people are freaking out. And it's an interesting thing until you've stood in a room that is completely on fire, like walls, ceiling, and you've got a hose in your hand, and you went in there to save the building, but you realize now you're in there to save yourself. It's a different thing. And I wonder about that with being a police officer. Like, how much of your day is spent, like, how hard is it, I guess is my question, to go out into the world with the idea, I'm out there trying to help other people, but your first thought is always, I can't help them if I'm dead. Like, is that in your head constantly? What's it like to be on the street is my question. Do you or someone that you love use insulin? Do you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes? Are you finding that your blood sugar gets low and you become sweaty, disoriented? It gets very high, you feel sick to your stomach. Would you like to stop that from happening? Would you like to be able to address those issues with carbohydrates or insulin as necessary and needed without having to poke a hole in your finger a bazillion times a day? You can do that with the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. That's available at dexcom.com/juicebox. Find out when your blood sugar is on the move, because Dexcom will show you not only what your blood sugar is, let's say 125, but it'll show you what direction it's moving in, up or down, or is it steady, and how quickly is it moving in one of those directions. Are you moving 1 point a minute, 2, 3? Dexcom can tell you. It can tell you in real time, and it can show you right there on your iPhone or Android. And if you don't want that information on your phone, you can carry a Dexcom receiver with you. Now you tell this receiver or your phone, this is the range I'm comfortable in. But please, when I fall below this number or go above this number, tell me, just like my daughters just did. My daughter's Dexcom is telling me that her blood sugar is over 120 by beeping like that. Why 120? Because that's where we set it. And you could set your own range and have a better, fuller picture of what your blood sugar is doing. Dexcom.com/juicebox. And by the way, this is new. If you're using the VA to get your insurance, Dexcom's now covered. Go to the link. When it asks you what kind of insurance you have, you just say VA. That easy. Dexcom.com/juicebox. Now, how are you going to get that insulin? Well, you could use an Omnipod tubeless insulin pump, like my daughter has been doing since she was 4 years old. Arden, by the way, is over 16 now, and she's been using an Omnipod every day during that time. It's an absolute friend in life with type 1 diabetes, and if you're using insulin for type 2 diabetes, same thing. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Here's the greatest part. They're going to send you, if you like, a free, no obligation demo of the Omnipod. It'll come directly to your home where you can try it on and wear it for yourself, where you can see what tubeless means. Not being tethered to something, not having to wear a pack with insulin in your belt or your bra or something like that. This thing's all in one. It's tiny, it's compact, it's easy to wear. You can hide it or wear it out loud and proud. Doesn't matter. And when you do need to do something with your insulin, the controller is completely separate from the pump, and it's easy to carry in your pocket or purse. Omnipod is definitely something you want to look at if you're considering leaving injections or you're looking to leave your tubed insulin pump. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Check it out. Last thing, of course, Touched by Type 1's 20th annual Dancing for Diabetes show is this Saturday, November 14th, 2020 at 7 p.m. touchedbytype1.org. Go check out all the kids and their amazing dance routines. It has to be virtual this year, but everybody has their fingers crossed for next year being back in person. dancingfordiabetes.org. Dexcom.com/juicebox, myomnipod.com/juicebox. The links in your show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Now it's time to find out more about living with type 1 diabetes and being a police officer.
It's definitely in the back of your head, and you always have to think about that when you're going, to calls for service, or you're stopping cars or anything like that. You always have to think about those situations, and because if you're not thinking about it and something happens, you're not going to be able to react to it. But you can't let it, take over, your mind and take over the situation. You have to, obviously we have a job to do. Whether that is to help someone, or if we end up having to arrest someone, or anything like that. Like I said, you can't really let those thoughts take over in that situation, but it always has to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of training, and I've listened to a lot of people talk, and they kind of talk about it like flipping your switch. You always have to have a little bit of violence on standby. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's something that you have to train and you get used to as you gain experience on the job. You can't expect a guy with 6 months on the job to come in and say, be able to flip that switch. But, maybe a guy with 5 or 10 years on the job, he's more acquainted with that violence that he has on standby. He can, if he has to use it, he can,
Yeah, it's a special person that can kind of walk that line. And I've always seen with the people I know who are police officers that some of the hardest one of the hardest things they have to do personally, I think, is be able to separate, I guess. I don't know a better way to say it, but what I noticed is that their entire day is spent with people who are breaking the law or trying to get over or something like that. And then how hard is it not to, in your personal life, think that everybody's trying to get over and treat people like people when you're home, but have enough, I don't know, just, understanding of what the world can be. Like, you often don't find a job where you're directed at crime constantly or people who are in that mindset. And I know you'll still run into citizens who need help and they're obviously not thinking like that. But when you get there, right, when you get out of that car, like, who's who? And how do you figure that out? And, and how do you stop yourself from being suspicious of everybody? Do you find that yet?
Yeah.
Or have you not been in it long enough to have that, like, feeling?
No, so I definitely know where you're coming from. I definitely, see people different even when I'm not at work or just going out with the family and stuff like that. You definitely kind of look at people differently, and you kind of, because you have to, especially if you're living in that yellow area where you're trying to react to things. You definitely see people differently. But if you're going to a situation and you have to find out what's going on, that just takes good investigative skills, and that's all built over time. I would say that I'm definitely getting better at. I wouldn't say I'm great, only having 5 years on the job, but you gain those skills over time, and you get better at finding out who's the good person and who's the bad person, just based off of their reactions and their demeanor.
You learn to read people.
Right.
Yeah. So we're going to get into how this all affects your diabetes or doesn't, or how you deal with it in a second. But have you had a moment yet where you thought, I don't need to be a cop anymore? Like, has anything really frightening happened that makes you rethink it? One of my close friends always tells me about the first home intrusion he went into that was happening. And he got in the house and the intruder went into the basement, and, the homeowner's like, he went downstairs, and my friend's standing at the top of the staircase, and he pulls his gun out and starts going downstairs, and realizes as he's going down that because of the makeup of the house, that his legs and his entire lower half of his body are going to be visible long before he can get his eyes into the space. And he said there was a split second there where he thought, why don't I just leave? But he didn't. He went down and did what he was supposed to do. But he's like, there was that moment where he's like, do I really want to be a police officer? And now's the time for me to know, Have you had one of those yet, or how's it gone for the first 5 years?
There's definitely been a lot of those, those pucker moments, if you want to call them that. I just recently, I think within the last 8 months or so, was put on our regional county SWAT team. So there's definitely been a lot of those moments where if we are clearing a house or we're going into a situation where we're possibly going to go in and find someone, you kind of think about it like, man, this is kind of crazy. Like, we're the guys that are going in. We're the first people who are going to get hurt if something happens. But I think we kind of wear that as a badge of pride. Like, hey, we're the guys that went in and found this person, or we're the people that went in and got the job done. And I think it's a little bit crazy sometimes, but I think that's something that you have to have as a police officer, to kind of have that pride of saying, hey, I'm the guy that got that job done, or I'm the guy that went out and did that thing,
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I have to, I'm going to tell you my funny story, and then I'm going to get into how diabetes is this. So I grew up in a pretty small town, and I'm going to give not enough details, especially because the internet back then, you could find it if you tried hard enough. But I grew up in this small town, with a police department of probably 10 or 15 guys. It's grown over the years. And there was this one officer who was just quiet. He went about his business. He wrote his tickets. He didn't really do much else. That was kind of the vibe about him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't gonna do much, and he was just gonna do what he was supposed to do. And he was wallpaper. There he was. And you saw him and you never thought twice about him. He's a decent enough guy. He wasn't a bad guy, nothing like that. And then one day he gets arrested because Wait, hold on. I swear to you, you're going to love this. He found out about sunken treasure in the ocean and decided that he was going to dive for it. And this was going to be how he was going to live the rest of his life, off of these doubloons. Okay. But how is he going to get enough money for the dive? Obviously, he's going to start robbing drug houses in the area. So he did, and was fairly successful at it for a while. If my memory serves, until one day he went into a place, a place where a lot of people were doing drugs and they were selling drugs out of, the place that he knew about. He went in there as a police officer to rob the place, which he had been doing. And someone using drugs in the place, if my memory serves, the son of a local politician recognized him. And that's how he got caught. No lie. The story goes that he went to prison, did his time, and then got out and disappeared. And people think he went and found that treasure and left because they never got the money back from the robberies. He shut up. He did his time. He held on to his money. He got out, and they think he went and got that money somehow off the ocean floor. So I always imagine this man somewhere on an island, just with a big smile on his face, with that same sort of like lackadaisical, like, I'm just here. Like, I just think of him as just existing. I don't know if that's actually what happened to him, but in my mind, that's how I like to think of him. But that's nuts, right?
Yeah, I can't even wrap my head around that. Just doing that. That's crazy.
And it was as much about the fact that he was just the quietest guy, who was probably at the time near 50 years old. He'd probably been a cop 15 or 20 years. Like, it just really, it was insane. And it's 100% true. And I know it's true because I know enough of the details to Google it. And I just found 2 news stories on it while I was talking to you. So I know it's not just stories that people told. But that was it. Like, you woke up one day and you're like, hey, remember Officer blah, blah, blah? Yeah, he got arrested. How come? He was robbing drug houses to make money to go look for Spanish doubloons on the bottom of the ocean floor. And you were like, get the hell out of here.
That is crazy.
Anyway, I hope you don't go that way, Sean.
No. I don't plan on it.
Listen, I don't think he had planned on it his whole life. It's just one day he snapped. I guess it was just one too many free medium coffees from 7-Eleven. He was like, I'm done with this. Anyway, what I really want to know about is, we just described a job that can be, fulfilling. You're off helping citizens. It can go from that fulfillment to anxiety and adrenaline very quickly. You have to be ready at a moment's notice. How do you manage your type 1 diabetes through that? That's why you're here. I really want to hear how you do that.
So I was actually using a Medtronic pump, but I just switched to an Omnipod.
Okay.
And I use the Dexcom G6.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually pushed me towards the Omnipod with your ads.
Oh,
on
those work?
your show.
Excellent. Hey, Dexcom and Omnipod, the ads work. Keep buying them.
But yeah, so I use the Omnipod and the Dexcom, and I kind of just use the principles that you talk about while I'm at work, pre-bolusing and bumping and nudging are the 2 biggest things that I try to use. Not trying to, use or have mountains in my numbers, you know what I mean? Just have them be small rolling hills if they end up getting too high or too low, So
is creating that stability helping you when out of nowhere you do a car stop and something looks weird and you feel that adrenaline kick in? Does your blood sugar jump up at that time? Does it try?
See, I haven't really ever had too much of an effect from adrenaline with my sugar going too high. But it definitely, having a more stable blood sugar and more stable numbers throughout the day definitely helps if something does, go bad, and say I'm away from my snacks or something like that. It definitely helps to have a more stable number if I'm away from things for a while,
See, I think that's interesting what you just said. So that when you, and I believe this as well, when you create stability that runs over hours and days, then when something happens that some people see as like, oh, this thing threw me way off, I think they don't realize the whole picture sometimes. if their basal's too high or too low, if they're bolusing too much at meals because their basal's too low, or whatever the things are, they have this imbalance of insulin running through their life. And then when something happens, it's easier for things to get upside down because so many other things are wrong. And so now that you've created the stability, when things come up, you're okay. What about, excuse me, what about, you ever have to like suddenly jump on foot and take off? Is it in your head? You know what I mean? Like, are you ever going to go pull your gun and pull out a candy bar instead because you've got stuff on you? Like, how do you handle like when you're away from the car, I guess? Are you ready for that?
Yeah, so I actually always have something with me. I always have like a glucose gel, and I have like 2 or 3 in my pocket at work. But like I said, I always try to keep my blood sugar pretty stable. If I feel like I'm going low, I will correct it before it gets, too low, just in case something like that does happen. And being on, different scenes and different situations, like I said, I always try and keep stuff on me. There have been situations where if I'm standing outside of a house on a perimeter and I'm going low, it's like, hey, let me, I call a guy up to me and say, hey, watch this side. I'm going to just, shoot some glucose real quick, and then I'll, right back in the fight. But like I said, I try to keep everything pretty stable so I don't have to get into that situation. So I can go an hour or 2 inside of the house or on a job and not have to worry about my sugar crashing or spiking.
Yeah. So because that's sort of your reality while you're at work, do you find that your management, I'm going to say control, although I know some people don't like that idea, but do you find that your control is better while you're working because you're more present about it, or do you carry that into your regular life? Because do you work shift work as well?
Yeah, so we switch each month. So I'm actually working on days this month, and then next month we'll switch to night work. We work a 12-hour shift, so we work 6:30 to 6:30. And but I actually, like you said, I actually think I have better control while I'm at work because of, like you said, that that awareness that things could go bad really quick,
Yeah. And so the reason I bring it up is because it's a simple idea that translates to everybody's life. And, you can say it any way. I've said it a bunch of different ways over the years, but if you pay attention for small moments, you don't get into big problems. It's when you try to ignore diabetes for 3, 4, 6 hours at a time and just hope that it's going to be okay, that you wake up to find, oh, my blood sugar is 200 points higher than I thought, or I've been 50 all night long, or something like that. But when you just look once in a while, it takes a brief couple of moments to say, oh, I'm good, or I need a little bump here or something, and get right back in the game. I'd much rather spend 30 seconds never getting way out of bounds than pretending for 3 or 4 hours that everything's okay. And so when you were describing how you handle work, I thought, I bet you he's like really within tolerances at that time. Where do you set your goals at, high and low, on your CGM?
So before listening to you, I had them wherever Dexcom has them preset. I think it's 70 to like 220 or something like that.
Okay.
But since listening to you, I bumped it down to originally 70 to 140, and now I'm 70 to 130.
Oh, good for you, man. Your A1C is probably sub 6. Were you like 5'7", 5'8"?
Last one, so I just started listening to your podcast in January, I think.
Okay.
And then my next appointment after that, I think, was in March. And I was at like 6.1.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to go and get my blood work done for my next appointment because I'm fairly certain I'm going to be under 6.
Yeah, congratulations. That's very, very well done. What were you prior to finding the show? Do you mind saying?
I think I was low 7s or high 6s. I could probably pull it up, but probably like a 6.7 to 7.
That's a really great adjustment. Do you feel differently by any chance?
I definitely feel better, especially. So before, even when I would go work out, go to the gym, do stuff like that, it was tough trying to keep my sugar in range.
Okay.
But then being able to find a good basal rate, I can go out into the gym and work out for an hour and not have my sugar go out of range for that hour and a half. And that's something that is pretty freeing for me because I work out a lot. It's one of the things I enjoy doing.
Mm. How did you handle it in college? Because I know at every level of baseball, it doesn't matter what division you're in, the guys, they lift a lot. They do a lot of hard workouts. Practices are long. Were you constantly feeding your insulin when you were in college?
Yeah, so I can tell you that I was a terrible diabetic in college. It's one of the things I regret a lot about my life as a diabetic. Probably the last 3 years, or the first 3 years, my senior year, I was definitely more focused on it. But I wouldn't check a lot. I wasn't using a CGM throughout college,
Mm-hmm.
so I was checking my sugar, but I was using a Medtronic pump. But I wouldn't check my blood sugar a lot. I would really only do it, before bed, and then after I woke up in the morning, and then kind of just ride the feeling I had throughout the day. If I felt low, I would eat. If I felt like I was too high, I'd give myself insulin.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, that's one of the things I kind of regret about my life as a diabetic is kind of just living that uncontrolled life for a few years in my college years.
How was it before college when your parents were more involved? Do you remember being similar?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty good. I wasn't, anything crazy like I am now, where I'm in pretty tight control.
Yeah.
But I was more controlled because obviously they're looking over my shoulder, and they're making sure that I'm doing things correctly, and making sure I'm testing for meals and giving myself insulin prior to eating rather than after eating, and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that it's impressive what you've done. And on a personal level, I feel like in an indirect way, I'm protecting South Jersey now. So I feel like I feel like I'm making it easier for you to protect them. And so I'm going to take credit in my own mind. I won't say it to anybody else except for the tens of thousands of people that are hearing me say it right now. But that's not the point, really. I'm joking mostly. But I'm happy that you're able to do your job better and live a better life just off of a couple of small ideas, really. Right tools, right job. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it sort of is what it is.
Yeah, that's all it is, man. It's all it is. It's just having the right tools and the right mindset to go out and make things work.
I'm happy for you. How long have you been married? You said you were married. You seem although I was married when I was 26, when you said it, I was like, oh, too young, but go ahead.
So I've been married we're going on 3 years, or 4 years now. What year are we in? Yeah, 4 years. We got married in 2016, October 2016. So what's that? What did that make me, 22? I'm about as good as you at math.
Yeah, I don't know. If you asked me how old I was when I got married or when I had my children, I have no idea. Even though the years, I know when my son's born, but if you ask me how old I was when he was born, I don't know. And that's even more ridiculous because he was born in 2000. So the math is really simple.
Yeah.
And I still can't come up with it off the top of my head. But that's neither here nor there. So did you guys know each other a long time?
Yeah, we actually met in college. She's from North Jersey in Warren County, but we met in college. She was actually my RA, my sophomore year of college.
I see, Sean. You started out trying to get a decent room and then went better. I see. Well, listen, interesting. She was from North Jersey. When she got into South Jersey, she probably thought she was in Pennsylvania, right? Because people from North Jersey think that like Princeton is South Jersey.
Yes,
yeah.
It was definitely a culture shock at first when she moved down here with me.
It's a very interesting thing. So New Jersey sort of split into these three. It's North, Central, and South. People in South Jersey think the Trenton area where the capital is, for example, they think of that as North, but that's Central. The people in only the people around Trenton understand that there's a North and a South, because the people up north by the city just think that by the time you get to Trenton, that's the bottom of New Jersey.
Right.
It's interesting how we don't understand the state at all.
The state's weird though, man. There's a lot of different things going on around here.
Yeah. Well, once you get far enough south, it feels like you're in Philly, honestly. It feels like you're in a suburb of Philadelphia. Like, do you feel like you live in Philadelphia moreover, or is that taboo to say down there?
Nah, we're more suburban. Like you said, we're, little neighborhood, nice little house. So it's not really, not really city like, but we definitely. I mean, we're like 20 minutes from Philly, so
Right. Just tell everybody for a second, not to get off track too far, but explain the joy when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Wasn't it?
It was great.
It was just amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I never thought I was going to say it. I thought for sure I would die before it happened. It was. I just remember sitting in my house for the last 20 minutes of the game, thinking like, I think they could win. It's such a strange thing.
Yeah, it was great.
To have no hope ever, to grow up with no hope around sports.
That and the Phillies in '08. I was more excited about that.
I was so thrilled. My son was still kind of young. And if I remember correctly, there was some weather that pushed the last World Series game, a day or two. And we were down to like carving pumpkins for Halloween while the game was being played. And I remember Cole being in the kitchen, a little kid carving it. Oh, excuse me. A little kid carving his pumpkin. And I just was like, come out here. Like, you have to watch this. And he's like, what? Like, it's baseball. And I'm like, no. And I remember, even though he was that young, he was 8 years old, I said the last time the Phillies won the World Series, my dad was alive and he's dead now. So I'm going to be dead the next time this happens. So stand here with me and watch this. And then, of course, the next year they're back in the World Series. And he's like, I thought you told me this was never going to happen again, you idiot.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a great baseball team there for a number of years. So
yes, it was.
Have you heard Sam on the show? Sam's a coach.
Sam Fold?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually listened to both of his episodes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, he's terrific. And I love that he's in Philadelphia. I was so happy when that felt so random to me when he left the A's and then suddenly was coaching in Philly. I thought, oh, this is terrific,
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So, okay. So you've got this job, the shift work I want to get into for a second, but I have to clear my throat. I apologize, Sean.
You're good.
I think it's just like a little Corona back there or something. I'm not sure exactly, but you shouldn't joke about that. Shift work. Now, when my buddy was young, they had shifts that you would probably think was crazy. He'd work 7 to 3s. The early guy was 6 to 2. And then there were 3 to 11s. The early guy was 2 to 10. And then 11 to 7. And then there was always an early guy. So there was always this one guy that came in an hour before the shift started, left an hour before, to keep this overlap going. So there was always a car on the street while people were switching over, that kind of feeling. But they would work them 5 on, 3 off, 5 on, 3 off. And they would, I don't know how he did it. Like there were times I thought it was going to kill him. He said he'd come out of a midnight into a 3 to 11 and felt like he lost 2 weeks of his life. And you're doing 12 hours for how many days in a row?
So we work a pitman schedule. So I worked Monday and Tuesday, and then I'll work all weekend. So I'll work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it just flips that next week. So after I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll be off Monday, Tuesday, work Wednesday and Thursday, and then off Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay, so there's these 2 days that keep moving forward on the calendar. You have off you'll have off like Wednesday, Thursday, then Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, like that kind of a thing. But you're always working 5.
Yep. So if it's easier to think about it, we basically have every other Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
Every other Friday,
which is a good schedule. I like it.
It is. But now, how does your management change? Or does it daytime to nighttime, days off? How do you find yourself changing basal rates or anything like that?
The only thing that I find is I may have to back my basal down on a night work, because I kind of jack my basal up. I have my basal setting kind of jacked up at night when I sleep because I tend to rise when I sleep. So I kind of use the technique that you talked about, is like the two hours before I see that rise, I kind of jacked my basal up, and it's helped level out my sugar overnight while I'm sleeping.
Okay.
But with that jacked up basal rate, I kind of temp basal while I'm at work at night. I know I can set up different basal patterns on the pod, but I think that's more complicated than my brain can handle. You know what I mean? Especially trying to Sorry, guys.
No, I feel like you could do it, but I think you would need three different programs. You would need you need a day off. You need your day off program. You'd need a night work program and a day work program. I would think there's a way to do that. And then you have to just go into your settings and change from days to nights. But anyway, you're doing great. It's not like you need it, but if it makes it easier for you one day, I think the opportunity's there.
It's definitely just been easier to kind of temp basal as I need it, or if I see a change, looking at my graph, I can just kind of temp it and then deal with it.
So now, do you ride with someone or are you in a single?
No, so we ride solo. Our town is kind of small enough where we have a 2-guy minimum for the street. Mm-hmm. We work squads of 3 guys, so a supervisor and 2 patrolmen. But like I said, we ride solo. It's easier to cover more area. We have a 4 square mile town, which is small, but we are still pretty busy with calls for service.
Yeah. I was wondering about the guys that you work with. Have you told each and every one of them? Do you tell each one of them, or do they just know on their own, or is it private? Like, how do you handle being diabetic in a setting like that?
So everyone knows. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think it has to come up really on like a hiring process. I think it's something that should come up in a job like a police officer. It's more demanding than like a desk job. Something like that. But like I said, everyone knows. The guys that I work with know. They're not super knowledgeable on like what to do in different situations. They kind of know. Like they know if my alarms go off, they look at me like, "You all right?"
Right. Guys are great, aren't they? Just guys. I don't know. Women will never really be able to appreciate this, but when you just get a bunch of guys together, I'm sure you work with females too, but guys are just like, "You all right? No? You're not going to die? All right, good." And then it's sort of like, I wish you knew how little we thought about things, generally speaking. But I get the vibe, what you're saying. They check on you a little bit, and that doesn't get old for you? Like it feels brotherly, I guess.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I've always been really open about my diabetes, and I really don't care that I have it. It sucks sometimes, but it's a part of me. So I think that people should know that I have it and how to deal with it. Especially with being on the SWAT team. I've talked to those guys about it. We have a medic on the team who's specifically assigned to have medical interventions if we need it. And I gave him some glucose gel and told him like, "Hey, listen, if I go down, if I pass out or something, look at my phone. If my number's red, give me some glucose,
Yeah.
But that's really the
extent of it.
Yeah, the extent of knowledge that they really need to know about it.
Is your SWAT team like my buddies is? Is it made up of guys from a lot of neighboring towns? And when something happens, you all come together?
Yep. We have about 5 or 6 different towns that are on the team. We're like 20 to 22 guys.
And then you support all the team supports all those towns in the situation where it's needed. How often do you get called for that?
We're kind of few and far between for call outs, especially now with the virus and everything that's going around. So we'll get call outs every once in a while for like a barricaded subject or emotionally disturbed person, something like that, where people are barricaded in a house and we're obviously the people who are more well trained for those situations.
I see.
But we also do search warrants, like narcotic search warrants and high-tech crime search warrants, like different stuff like that. We do those more than we get called out for situations.
I see. How has COVID-19 changed how you do your job?
Yes. So I don't know if it's for the better or not, but we've definitely changed the way that we do things. We're handling a lot more calls over the phone. So like, whereas before somebody would call in like a theft complaint or something like that, they're reporting something stolen. Mm-hmm. We would go out to their house and talk to them and get all their information and then do the report. Whereas now we're, handling that call over the phone. So we don't have contact with people.
There's going to be an app one day.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of police departments that are doing it now, where you can report like non-violent crimes or property crimes on their website. You can just go on, put in the information for your report, and then it'll be investigated by the police department. So
there are probably
really
police officers that'll never work on the street. They'll just do crime digitally. That makes sense, right? Though. I mean, honestly, as the population explodes, you can't be everywhere constantly, right? I mean, it just makes sense. And limiting contact is limiting contact. But in a real situation, like, listen, I know they've probably given you, I don't want to get you in trouble. They've probably given you rules about how to handle yourself. But the fact of the matter is that if something goes down out of nowhere quick, you're not going to stop to cover your face before you go do your job, right? Like, you're going to end up doing what you're going to do. I don't see how in some lines of work do you know what I mean? Like, hold on a second. I'm sorry that guy's hitting you. Let me just get my face mask on before I come over there and help. Like, that's not going to be the case. Do you find yourself somewhere between reality and what a perfect situation would call for?
Yeah, so we actually have a response protocol or continuum that we have that our command staff put down to us. And, there's always that section that says if, everything in this, policy or whatever is subject to, situations. So if there is a situation like you're explaining where it is emergent, like we're pulling up and someone's getting beat up or something like that, we're not going to take into account the time to put a face mask on or put our personal protective equipment on. We have to go address the situation, and then once everything is calmed down, then we'll go back and we'll put our mask on and we'll deal with that. But we have a job to do. We have a duty to protect people, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to worry about the time it takes to put that mask on.
How do you personally think of COVID-19 in relationship to you having type 1? Are you going with, I mean, I'm sure you're being careful as you can, but are you going with, I'm healthy, my blood sugars are stable, they're in a good range, I'm probably at no more risk than someone else, or do you have concerns?
I wouldn't say I have a lot of concerns. I kind of am, like you said, I'm pretty healthy. I think my immune system is pretty good, minus the fact that I have diabetes, but I wouldn't say I'm too concerned about contracting it. And I think if I did contract it, I think I would be okay fighting it off, or having my body deal with it.
Well, as my friend Vicky said to me, your immune system is pretty tough. It kicked the shit out of your pancreas. So
right.
It's a very strange situation to be in, though. Honestly, you're looking and it makes sense what I'm hearing. I don't disagree with, like, I cover my face when I go out. I don't think I'm sick, but if I am, I don't want to make someone else sick during this time, or wherever, if I can help it. And at the same point, we have to be a little realistic at, moving forward. We're not all going to live inside of our homes for the rest of our lives. It's just not what's going to be. I really hope we get to a point where we protect people who are at risk, and, and everyone else sort of gets to go back and do what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, you're just in a unique situation. You really are. Yeah, I've seen it happen at fire calls and rescue calls. I've seen it happen with police officers. There's a moment where you have to make a decision, and you can't always do everything. You can't always open up the book and follow the steps. Sometimes it has to be, like you said, this is emergent. We needed to act right now. There's a story the other day about a very, dedicated nurse who had I forget where it happened, but she had a patient who was in trouble, and she ran into the room, and it ended up killing the nurse. Like, she died a couple of weeks later from corona. And, but she didn't, they say she didn't stop. She knew, she wasn't unaware of what she was doing, but she felt a calling to help these people. It's what her job was. And she did it. And it's what it called for in the moment. And I'm assuming that's how police officers feel as well.
Yeah, like I said, there's a calling, like you said, and, we have a purpose world. Everyone has a purpose, and my purpose is to go out and help people and make a difference, or at least try to make a difference. And that's what I do every day. I strap on the uniform and strap the vest on. I go out and try to fulfill that purpose and make a difference in someone's world.
You're a good dude, man. Like it's a special person who's willing to take a job like that. I think of, it's really strange because, over the last number of years, you'll hear stories about, cops who aren't doing things the right way or, violating people's civil liberties in a way that I think everyone can look at and think that's not okay. I don't want that to be happening. But I always get afraid of, just like with everything else, you don't hear enough stories about all the people who are just out there doing it, and doing a good job and doing it for the right reason. It's the internet or the news. You hear about the bad stuff, not the good. It's nobody takes 5 minutes to click through a picture to find out about, a police officer who stopped and, got a cat out of a tree or helped a woman across the street, not to use a bunch of old, tired ideas. But you know what I mean? Like just to do the regular everyday things that people need. It's a kindness and it's their job. And we never hear about that,
Right.
It sucks. It really is. It's terrible to have bad apples be able to ruin the whole barrel. But, especially when you're out there working so hard and doing such a good job. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And I'm sure everyone else does as well, especially with your circumstances. But moreover, Sean, I'm really thrilled with how far you've come with your type 1 in what is basically like 6 or 7 months. It's
I definitely feel better, and I appreciate you putting the info out there. You've definitely helped me because I've known a lot of these things, whether it's pre-bolusing or using a little bit less insulin if my sugar's high and trying to make it come down a little bit more gradually than plummeting. Getting my basal rates right. I've known all these things, but kind of hearing it from somebody else and hearing it from a podcast, I listen to a lot of podcasts, it's definitely helped and it's definitely pushed me to make a change.
I'm thrilled for you. I really wish I understood. I think I, in a broad way, have the idea of what it's like, but I still don't, like when people like you say what you just said, like I knew a lot of this, I just didn't do it. Do you have a feeling for what it was about hearing it through a podcast that made you go, I'm going to try this? Do you think you were just ready, or did it flip a switch? Do you have any idea? Even you might not even know.
Man, I don't really know. Like you said, it could just be I was ready to do it. Kind of just ready to take the not the risk, but take the risk and just say screw it. I'm gonna mess with my basal rates. I'm gonna do this stuff and see if it works. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I'll just change it.
Good for you.
I don't know if you've ever heard of Jocko Willink and his podcast, but he talks about having, being disciplined in your life and how discipline equals freedom. And I try to live that way in my personal life and my work life and be disciplined in the things I do. But I wasn't really being too disciplined with my diabetes. I was kind of letting that go to the wayside. So I think it was just me realizing it was time to take control of the diabetes and, be in control of everything in my life rather than just letting one thing go.
Just feeling like I've got all these other things in line. Why the hell am I ignoring this one thing that's got such impact over, everything about me, really? Like you could be as good at your job or as good at being married or, whatever else you're going to be at. But if your blood sugars are bouncing all over the place and you feel like hell and you're hurting your long-term health, like what's the point of the rest of it? Like that's got to be first, right? So, and Jocko, right. Jocko's the military guy, right? Was he a SEAL?
Yeah, he's a retired Navy SEAL.
Yeah. Is he the guy that puts like the time he gets up in the morning on his Instagram every day and it's like some ungodly early time? Is that the person I'm thinking of?
Yeah, he takes a picture of his watch every morning. He gets up at 4:30 and works out.
Yeah, God bless him. He deserves to be in good shape if he's up at 4:30. I try to wake up at 4:30 and there's going to be a noise from my knee and my ankle and my lower back that's like, brother, you better lay back down. But I guess I'd be better off if I was up working out. But let's not do too much. So I think what I've learned here is that it's just like when I'm talking to people privately, and you'll talk for like 45 minutes, and sometimes I'll end up laying things out, and I can tell it's the first time they've ever heard them. But in the end, whether it's the first time they've ever heard them or it's the 50th time and they're finally going to listen, a lot of the times I feel like my role in that moment is just it's a pat on the butt. It's like, you could do this. Move your basal and see what happens. try this and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes people just need a voice to say to them, what's the worst that could happen? Like, you're only moving at 0.1. Like I said to someone, we were doing a Zoom the other day, and the lady's like, can I move my kid's basal from, where it is to this? And I was like, look, I don't know, like for certain, I can't tell you. I'm like, but what I can tell you is the kid weighs 40 pounds and you're asking me about moving his basal 0.05. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think that's going to kill anybody. Like, give it a shot and see what happens, And I said, and if his blood sugar starts going down, put it back. Like, you don't have to stand there and watch it. There's no rules like, oh, you moved it, you got to leave it there. So that's really excellent, man. Good for you. I think that's wonderful. I'm gonna say thank you and let you go. And then I want to tell you one more thing privately. So if you don't mind, can you hold on 1 second?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Sean, I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much. Hey, huge thanks to Sean for wanting to be on the show, share his story, and give encouragement to younger people who'd like to be of service to others. And thanks to Dexcom, makers of the G6 continuous glucose monitor. You can learn more about it at dexcom.com/juicebox. And of course, the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump and its free no obligation demo offer can be found at myomnipod.com/juicebox. And don't forget to head over to touchedbytype1.org on Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Check out that Dancing for Diabetes program. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.